we're here today with Dr. Uma Naidoo, psychiatric nutritionist and author of 2 best-selling books. Welcome, Dr. Naidoo.
Thanks so much, Ashley. It's great to meet you.
And so I'm just going to jump right in because I absolutely adore your books and their readability, the practicality behind them, but also how brave you are. And so, walking us through your experience with cancer and how, as a physician, you had to take a step back and evaluate, am I walking the talk as it relates to not just nutrition, but also what gives you joy in life in terms of, meditation and dance. And it really aligns with our mission at Pause, which is to raise awareness that these corporations do big annual strategy planning. They identify their brand, they identify tactics, but as human beings, we don't take the time to, step out of the chaos of life and assess, what is our brand and are we actually living up to the things that give us optimal health, joy, and all those things. So can you share with us a bit about what gave you the motivation or inspiration to be so candid with everybody?
In which part? Was it the part about cancer that you were interested in?
Well, yes, your personal journey to really, self-reflect and transform your behavior from,
Yeah, thanks for asking that. I feel like if you write a book, sharing your authentic self to the extent that you feel comfortable sharing is important, because I do feel that readers connect with that. They connect with authenticity. And I felt that it's not a perfect life, and it's not about perfect eating or a perfect lifestyle. All of us are kind of imperfect. We make mistakes. Things don't go well. Sometimes they don't go well when things are great in our lives, and it can be the stress that the good things can create that can spin us out. And I felt that sharing it was hugely meaningful because I truly learned how nutrition impacted my life in the most difficult time, but also it was sort of a blessing because beyond a doubt, I feel comfortable now saying how powerful nutrition is. It's not the only thing. It's one of many things. It's a pillar in lifestyle. But I know that I lived the experience, and I felt that that was powerful to share. It may not happen for everyone, and they may not want to choose that path, but it worked for me. And I felt that that was important. It was definitely one of the aha moments in my career. And that work became the blueprint, really the blueprint of what I do for others now.
And so you also shared candidly your perspective on the world of medicine, focusing more on individual systems rather than the whole entire body, as well as sort of the emphasis on medicine over lifestyle. Can you share a little bit about, what is it like today, and do you see there being shifts more towards your perspective?
I think that there are small and steady shifts. I don't think that they are huge. I think we have a lot more work to do before we get more people and doctors and practitioners of all kinds on board. But there is movement, and I'm definitely happy about that. But I would say that for the most part, physicians, number one, doctors in the United States do not study nutrition. About only 20% of our medical schools even teach adequate or enough courses in nutrition or any nutrition at all. We are encouraged and incentivized as doctors working in a practice or in a hospital to prescribe medications and see many patients. So it becomes this psychopharmacology in mental health, psychopharmacology treadmill, because you are always prescribing. Someone is always starting a medication, then you're catching up with the side effects. There's no stop in between that or question of, well, what about adjusting other things that could help the person? And that's really where I feel very fortunate to have done clinical work in this area, where if someone was not acutely ill and otherwise functioning in their life, that they could actually work with me on nutrition and lifestyle measures, and including aspects of their metabolism to feel better over time. But if not, people go directly from an appointment to the pharmacological treadmill, and that's it.
Right. Right.
It's hard to get off that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just curious, how do you bridge, because I see a lot of physicians on social media, I shouldn't say a lot, but some physicians on social media sort of discrediting what other physicians are saying because there's a little bit of evidence, but not like a robust randomized control trials. And so, particularly as women with less health research available, how do you as a clinician bridge that? Well, there is some information versus, and it could be good versus like having that pure science evidence.
Sure. Can you give me a recent example so that I can reflect maybe on that with you?
Well, I'm just thinking, for example, in the area of testosterone or the use of estrogen for heart versus statins. And so there was a bit of a debate. Well, there's not enough evidence to say estrogen versus statins. And I don't think the conversation was even ever about one or the other. It was just like both could maybe work. And so in the food world, the whole concept of phytoestrogens, not maybe having enough evidence to say, yes, this can help with your hormone balance, but, there being some research out there that it is beneficial.
Right. No, I think that's a great point. I think you mentioned earlier that I really push back against this idea that there are different parts of our body. While there are different, they're in the same body and they're all connected to our brain. So mental health is not above the neck. And when it comes to integrating that in a similar way, we have to integrate the research that's out there. On any given day that I quote, say, taking omega-3 fatty acids for their positive benefits, whether it's cardiac or brain health, someone can quote an opposite study. And I think it's about finding a personalized approach for that individual and getting less into this argumentative space of I'm right, because that's just ego. I'm right, you're wrong, this is what the study says. Always back it up with evidence. That's why in both my books, I have extensive endnotes. So any person, whether it's a lay person, just person going to a doctor's office who needs to look something up, or physician. And a lot of physicians do read my books. There are studies you can read and assess for yourself. So I'm not trying to convince you, I'm sharing what's out there.
Right.
And I take that approach publicly as well, where, if you feel everyone in the world should be vegan or you feel everyone in the world should be carnivore, that's your perspective. But I'm going to deal with who comes to see me.
Right.
And certainly when I had a very active clinic, I would really work with that individual on what they wanted to do. So if they happen to eat seafood, great. If they happen to be vegan, great. We can always find solutions. It's not for me to judge what they eat. It's for me to advise. And I think that that's sometimes a little bit of what even some of the doctors fall into, which is they feel they have to tell you what to do based on what they do, but it may not work for you. And I think that it's important to maintain that perspective.
I think so too. I think a lot of people, they want to be told by the doctor, whereas really the accountability or the confidence to really understand yourself and voice what will work well for you or not, and what your, how you could adopt or modify your behavior that's realistic.
I think, yes, I think that's a good point, Natalie. And I also feel like, very often if I'm writing for media or speaking in a podcast or conversation, I'll say, don't forget to run by your doctor. But I have to tell you, when I say that, I should really be qualifying, when that's regarding a medication. And it's regarding a medication that you might be taking, or an interaction of that medication with a food. Because our doctors don't study nutrition. So really asking them about a supplement or a nutritional benefit is not going to serve you, because they're not going to know. And I've started to just, really dive deeper into that with people when I offer guidance, because I feel like I'm setting them up for failure, because the doctor's not going to be able to answer that question. But if it's, should I take a statin, always also ask your doctor, about that medication if you have to take it, but then also follow it up with, what about lifestyle stuff? Would you give me, if I'm not in dire straits with my lab values, would you give me 2 to 3 months to work on some other things?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And I loved, it was the first time I had read as it relates to gut health, and so much exciting research, and it just feels like a whole new frontier of figuring out we've got all of these microorganisms living in our bodies. But I hadn't heard or thought about the perspective of it being a two-way communication. So,
Right.
the gut to the brain and the brain to the gut. And so can you share with listeners a little bit about what I'm even talking about here?
Sure. So one of the mechanisms that we understand nutritional psychiatry, and my work is as the Director of Nutritional Lifestyle and Metabolic Psychiatry at the hospital. And what I do is integrate these areas. But in my research, as I wrote my first book, This Is Your Brain on Food, and then the second book is Calm Your Mind with Food, what I began to understand about the research behind the gut and brain, because talk about these different systems, they are in different parts of the body, but they arise from the exact same cells in the human embryo. So I like to call them fraternal twins. They
Yeah.
kind of divide up and they go to different parts and they look very different, but they're from the same cell line. And these twin organs are the gut and the brain, and they remain connected throughout our lives anatomically by the vagus nerve, which is the 10th cranial nerve. But when you think about it more deeply and you understand research, the vagus nerve is a two-way system. It sends messages back and forth between these two organs in both directions. And often these messages are the neurotransmitters, and then 90 to 95% of neurotransmitters like serotonin, often called the happiness hormone, are in the gut, are made in the gut, and the receptors are the gut. So realize that the food we're eating is really interacting in this environment. And then there's this bidirectional messaging system, like teenagers texting each other all the time. I'm sure we have one or a few of those in our lives. There's a way in which these two organs are always communicating.
Just a really interesting perspective, and makes you realize, that nutrition connection with your brain is so critical. And, I love how in both of your books, you sort of chapter it out in different mental health or issues, and then sort of talk specifically about the nutrition tied to each of those. Can you give us a bit of a drive-by of, if someone's saying, okay, I want to improve my overall mental health and well-being, like what are some cold notes for people to be more mindful of in terms of what they're eating?
I think the first thing, I like people to use what I call my SAW method or SAW protocol, which is SAW. S is for swap, A is for add, and W is for walk. And that's because I want them to be able to remember whether in the supermarket, they're traveling, they're on an airplane, they are driving their car, that there is an intervention they can reach out for if they feel they are ready. So swap is really, what is an unhealthy habit that you've picked up? Maybe it's, usually this is the kind of habit that's bothering you. Maybe it's, you began eating ice cream during COVID every night, or you bought more cookies during COVID because you were bored and you were home alone or home with your family, and what was there to do? So swap that out, swap that habit that's bothering you because it's reached your consciousness. Swap it out with the healthy version, a healthy habit, a change it out, have a piece of fruit, have some berries and nuts, a handful of berries and nuts. What is it that you can do that's different? With add, this is pretty easy depending on your lifestyle, what you're doing in your life. Maybe, you're working out more and you need more protein. Or you've spoken to your doctor, your nutritionist, and you really want to add more protein. Maybe you don't eat enough vegetables or fiber, and you get fiber from vegetables, beans, nuts, seeds, and legumes. Add that in, add extra servings of vegetables. Maybe you're not eating enough plants from nuts and seeds. Maybe you can add those in. So all of those are possibilities. including things like hydration. And then the W is a general group of walks. So it could be yoga, meditation, mindfulness, exercise that you should be doing or could be doing.
Yeah, I think that is, from a health behavior change perspective, I'm very passionate about health behavior change. And I think, people can be so hard on themselves because, particularly with all the social media and seeing all these people that look perfect and are doing it perfect. And, as human beings, changing behaviors is extremely difficult. And so I think your approach is very practical and doable. And, we promote picking small changes that are, that are going to make you feel good about achieving them, but are also something that you can do consistently and are sustainable, and then building on that from there.
They have to be sustainable. If not, you're only going to do them for a week or a few days.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much for your time. I absolutely encourage everybody to read both of your books, and I'm hoping that there's more to come because I'm a huge, huge fan. So
Thank
thank
you
you
so
so
much.
much.
It was a pleasure speaking to you. Thanks for having me.